All right, if you're a law student staring down a constitutional law exam, you've seen this term everywhere: judicial independence. But what does it really mean when you've got to break it down under pressure? Well, today, we're going to build that perfect exam answer together, piece by piece. We're diving deep into this absolutely essential and, you'll see, surprisingly tricky constitutional concept. You know, this quote from Tom Ginsburg just hits the nail on the head. Every country seems to praise this idea, but it gets used to justify all sorts of things, from court budgets to who gets to be a judge. So, what exactly is this thing that everyone agrees is so important, but almost no one can clearly define? So, to crack this puzzle, here's our game plan. We're going to tackle this with 5 key questions. First, whose independence are we even talking about, and from whom? Then, how do we actually safeguard it? What's its actual scope? What does it cover? After that, we'll get to the big one. What's the core rationale? And to wrap it all up, we'll look at its biggest challenge, that constant tug of war with accountability. Okay, let's get into it.
Okay, first things first. Before we can even begin to understand what independence is, we have to be super clear on who, or maybe what, is supposed to be independent, and who exactly they need to be independent from.
Right off the bat, you've got to see this concept running on 2 parallel tracks. On one track, you have individual independence. Think of this as a personal shield for a judge, protecting them from someone whispering in their ear about how to decide a case. Then, on the other track, you've got institutional independence. This is the big picture, making sure the entire judicial branch as a whole is structurally separate from the legislative and executive branches. So it's both the single judge and the entire judiciary that need this protection. Now, the main threat we always think about is the government, right? The other branches trying to nudge things their way. But there's another equally crucial threat. For a court to be a fair referee in any fight, the judge has to be independent of the parties in the case, too. I mean, that's the whole foundation of impartiality.
And don't think for a second this is some newfangled idea. The fight for this principle has deep, deep roots. Back in 17th century England, judges basically worked for the king. But you start to see these glimmers of change, like Lord Coke famously declaring that no one can be a judge in their own case. The real game changer, though, was the Act of Settlement in 1701. It got rid of the idea that a judge serves at the monarch's pleasure and brought in tenure during good behavior. And all of that history culminates in things like the Federalist Papers, which really locked in the judiciary as an equal partner in government.
Okay, so we know who needs to be independent and from whom. The next logical step and a great point for an essay is how. How do we actually protect this principle? What are the nuts and bolts? Well, it's not just one magic rule. It's more like a web of protections woven through the entire legal and political system. You can basically sort them into 4 buckets. You've got your hardcore constitutional safeguards, your unwritten political customs, specific laws passed by legislatures, and even rules that the judiciary puts on itself. Let's start with that constitutional core. Think of it like a fortress built around each judge. The first wall is security of tenure. You can't just get fired because you made an unpopular but legally sound ruling. The second wall is financial security. As Alexander Hamilton pointed out, you can't have the legislature holding a judge's salary hostage. And finally, the main gate is locked with a really onerous removal process, like impeachment, which is designed to be so difficult that it can't just be used as a political weapon. But here's the thing. It's not all just black-letter law. Independence also leans heavily on these unwritten rules, these political handshakes and conventions. For example, there's a strong tradition that you don't try to kick a judge off the bench just because you hate their legal reasoning. That's a powerful political norm, not something you'll find written in a statute. And this shield just keeps getting thicker. You have modern laws, like the UK's Constitutional Reform Act from 2005, which actually makes it a legal duty for the government to uphold judicial independence. And then the judiciary itself adds another layer, creating its own codes of conduct. These are self-enforced rules designed to make sure judges not only are independent, but that the public sees them as independent too. Okay, let's keep building this out. The concept of independence isn't some magic blanket that covers everything a judge does. It applies to very specific and distinct parts of their work. For your exam, this is a fantastic way to structure an answer. Break the scope down into these 3 realms. You've got decisional independence, that's the freedom to actually judge. Then there's administrative independence, control over how the courts are run. And finally, disciplinary independence, the judiciary's power to police its own members for misconduct. Now, of those three, decisional independence is the absolute heart of the matter. It's the whole point. It's what we call the sine qua non, Latin for without which, nothing. It's the one essential ingredient. If a judge's decision can be swayed by threats or bribes, the whole system just falls apart. It loses all legitimacy. So, at the bigger institutional level, administrative independence is what props up that decisional core. We're talking about things like the courts having control over their own budgets so they can't be starved of cash by an angry legislature. It's about setting their own rules for managing cases. And, crucially, it's about having a big say in who gets appointed as a new judge to stop politicians from just packing the courts. So, we've covered the who, from whom, how, and what. Now we get to the most important question of all, the one that ties everything together. Why? Why do we go to all this trouble? I mean, really. Why do we build these incredibly complicated constitutional fortresses? Why do we give this amazing level of protection and insulation to a small group of people who aren't even elected? To really get the why, you have to nail the difference between these two terms, because they get confused all the time. Think of it like this. Independence is the prerequisite. It's the structural setup we create. Impartiality is the goal. It's that unbiased state of mind we want from a judge in every single case. You simply can't have a truly impartial judge if they aren't independent first. Ultimately, this whole massive structure is built on two giant pillars. First, we need a fair referee to settle fights, especially when one of the players is the super powerful government itself. And second, we need a guardian for the Constitution, an institution that can act as a check on the other branches and make sure they're playing by the rules. That's what upholding the rule of law is all about. And James Madison said it best in the Federalist Papers. This isn't just about making government run smoothly. He argued that separating these powers and making sure the judiciary is independent enough to push back is our number one defense against the concentration of power, which he called the very definition of tyranny. But here is the massive twist in the story. When you create a judiciary that's powerful enough and independent enough to stand up to the government, shielded from all that political pressure, well, you create a brand new and very profound constitutional problem. Which brings us to our final thought. And for your studies, this is the one that really matters. Just think about it for a second. If we make judges independent to protect us from the government, how do we make sure that those same unelected judges, who often have jobs for life, stay accountable to the law and the public they're supposed to serve? Who shields the public from the judiciary? That is the fundamental, unresolved tension at the very heart of constitutional democracy, and it's a question you absolutely need to be ready to wrestle with in any exam.